Yeah,
Well, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you coming on.
The city of New York, Boricua from the Bronx.
I tried to watch a video you did, but I think it was over my head. It was the one on YouTube on metabolic considerations and mood disorders.
Oh yeah, that was for a medical conference. Yeah,
That definitely was not for someone like me.
medicine is really good at coming up with all kinds of unnecessary complex words just to say something really simple. So, that's the language of medicine. But no, we will certainly we'll have a great chat.
Dr. Roger McIntyre, can you introduce yourself for everybody? Let us know who you are, please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, happy to. So, I'm a psychiatrist. I trained as a psychiatrist after I completed medical school, and I am a professor, which really means I work at a university, and I work there full time. And I'm a doctor. I'm a psychiatrist. I see patients who suffer from depression and bipolar disorder. The other part of my life, and a big part of my life, is I'm especially interested in developing new treatments for people who have depression or the related condition, bipolar disorder. That's my professional titles. Who I am when I get up in the morning and I'm having a cup of coffee, and who I am really, I'm an advocate of people, a supporter of people who are affected by mental illness and their families. And I have been given an incredible life by people who have mental illness. It gives me tremendous privilege, and I try to use that privilege and that opportunity to try and really make things better and try to change the game in psychiatry so people can have better treatments that work faster, get their lives back, and also reduce suicide. So it's been frankly, it's been a surreal life, and I guess it's called a career, but for me, it just feels like a passion.
If you love what you do, and it sounds like you do, then it isn't a job. It's not a career.
Yeah.
It's like you said, a passion, and it's going to make you healthy physically and mentally.
It's one of the realities. I mean, look, this has been a terrible time. COVID-19, people are in a lot of stress right now. And secondly, is that a lot of people don't know where to get help and cannot get help. And
particularly men, we don't want to get help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our guys don't like to talk about their feelings, and they think it's not as cool or not as not as masculine maybe, or something.
That's exactly what it is. We perceive it as weakness.
Yeah.
And that's changing. I feel like it's changing lately. More men are becoming more open about these things. Even the younger generation talks a little more, but it's still in certain circles and it is very much viewed as weakness. I remember thinking to myself, don't be soft, get it together. So it's hard for men to for me to come and tell you, hey, I used to want to hurt myself, like there's a stigma, right? There's a stigma to mental health overall.
Yeah.
Period. Overall, it exists, and then there's obviously the tough guy thing for men.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I think that's all true. I agree with you. I think men they want to be cool, they want to be tough, they want to be masculine, and maybe this is not. A lot of men don't think talking about their feelings is in keeping with that. I think the other part too is I just think, when it comes to just language and vocabulary, I don't think that men maybe have the words down, even describe their feelings as well. And there's some scientific literature to support that. And why it's concerning? Well, it's concerning for, many reasons, but just one reason out of many. Over the last 2 decades or so in the United States, the suicide rate's been steadily going up. And America is kind of it's a unique country in so many great ways, and so many incredible ways. One of the ways it's unique in not so great ways is that it's one of the few countries in the world where the suicide rate's going up the last 10, 20 years. And when you look at some of the details of the statistics, it's a lot of men. Now, it's women too, but it's a lot of men, especially middle-aged men who've lost their jobs. And then get involved in alcohol and opioids. Not everyone has, this is not for everybody, and there's not a sort of a one-size-all-fits explanation to this, but this is kind of a common story. And I think a lot of men, especially middle-aged men and older men, have a real difficult time talking about their emotional state, their feeling state. So I agree with you.
Well, it becomes, if you lose your job, you can't provide. And if you
Yeah,
have children and you have a home and you have a family, you feel all those feelings of inadequacy, being unable to fulfill your
that's right.
manly job and all that
That's
stuff.
right.
I could see how that happens. Plus, we're not really allowed to say, "Oh, this is a cute puppy," and express ourselves. You have all these men who've been suppressing their emotions their whole life. Of course, they're gonna snap. A lot of people, a lot of my friends, have expressed that they've been feeling depressed, that they've been feeling, sad. They're tired and exhausted. A lot of people, and some who are generally very cheerful and very happy and stuff have been kind of getting weighed down. A couple days ago, I did yoga with my wife. I was doing a stretching movement, and I
Uh-huh.
just burst into tears. I was just doing like a stretch, and then I just started sobbing, and I like, where did this come from?
Interesting.
So,
Well, it's an interesting time we're in right now. Of course, COVID-19, and I for many months now I've been reflecting on COVID-19, and as we all have, and I often refer to COVID-19 and as what I call the triple threat. And what I mean by that is that yes, we have a public health crisis with this virus, but
mm,
in addition to that, there's two other threats. First, we have an economic and employment problem going on right now. People are really struggling. And then thirdly, we got a mental health crisis going on. And along with these three different enemies, the virus, the economic uncertainty, and the mental health crisis, there's something else that's happening, and it's uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. We don't even know, what's going to happen to the economy. We don't know what's going to happen in the election next week.
right.
We don't even know if there's going to be Halloween this weekend. I mean, people don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? There's so much uncertainty. I mean, do we not even agree on one thing? Are we having Halloween or not? People don't even know if it's even happening. So there's so much uncertainty. It's obviously a very superficial example, but it's a powerful statement. We don't even know if Halloween's happening. Um,
Right.
so um,
If we can't even agree on Halloween, how are we going to agree on deeper, or
exactly.
even know about much greater issues? Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. People don't even, and there's so much uncertainty. And look, if life was perfect right now, we had no COVID, we had no economic problems, and all we had was uncertainty in our lives, that's bad. Uncertainty is bad.
Right.
And
Right.
so uncertainty is like adding a little gasoline to the fire of COVID-19, this economic crisis, and this mental health crisis. It's adding gasoline to that fire. And just like a California wildfire, it's just like the wind blowing up that fire. And I think this is a terrible piece to it. It doesn't help that we got so much political uncertainty going on as well. And of course, we'll see what
Mhm.
happens next week, pretty soon in terms of the election. But anyways, but I think that it's a terrible time for people, and some people in our society are definitely doing worse than others. There's no doubt about it.
What can be done as a society or individuals to help?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, look, that I think is the $1 million question. And here's my take on it: listen and redirect. Listen and redirect. What do I mean by that? Well, if you have family members or friends who are suffering, yeah, absolutely listen. Be supportive to people, loved ones, and people you care about, of course. If in fact, though, that their distress is getting so severe and they are really not doing well, can't really function too well, and even thinking about suicide, I'd redirect them to a local medical facility, a hospital, a clinic, get them some medical attention, because these things can be treated, and treat it with good treatments, talk therapy, counseling. Sometimes people need medication if they have depression or something like that. But we have to redirect, and the medical establishment is certainly able to help people. But your point's really so important, because what can we do? Well, I think there's lots of things we can do. COVID-19 is a total disaster. Let's just call it what it is. It's a total disaster. But it doesn't mean we have to end up, in a bad, dark place. There's things that we can do to protect ourselves. And a lot of it is, well, first of all, it's very cost effective, and it's pretty simple, and it works. So things like structuring your day, like before COVID, our days were structured because kids go to school and people go to work
Right.
and drive and sit in the traffic and they get their coffee and so on and so on. Now people are working from home and their life's so unstructured. You got to have structure. There's something about having structure that just settles the brain, settles the mind. Okay. Then you got to get your sleep. This is basic. Thirdly, portion control. Now, when I talked about portion control, I used to just mean don't eat too much food, don't drink too much alcohol, right? Now, I'm also saying don't consume too much social media. Why? Because we all know the problem of air pollution. We know the problem of noise pollution. We got social media pollution. And social media pollution is when you have toxic, poisonous stuff on social media that people are consuming at a very high amount, like 3, 4, 5, 6 hours a day. We did a study showing that people spending lots of time on social media are more stressed out, more anxious, can't sleep, really down on themselves. That doesn't mean social media is a bad thing any more than fast food. Yeah, have a burger once in a while. Okay, but don't have burgers all the time. Okay. And so now with respect to exercise, it's a great way to protect yourself, and reach out to friends and connect as you can, if you can, through different platforms and so on. And then what can the government do? Well, look, I hope the stimulus gets through Congress and the House, et cetera. People need to get some funding from the government to help them out, protect the small business, bridge them over, for their mortgage, their rent, stuff like that. Government can't take care of us forever. No, I wouldn't want that. But I think that there needs to be a bit of a bridging, so to speak. And I think there needs to be consideration about that. And also helping people around, maybe some funding could go to providing psychiatric services for people who need them right away. And that's been shown, like in the history books, going back like over 10 years ago or so, when we had the Great Recession, it was shown that when government did those types of things, provided psychiatric first aid for people and provided some income support for a period of time and, small business support, that helped a lot in terms of reducing suicide. So that's a playbook that's been sort of done before. We can just take some lessons from that playbook. And then secondly, I think there's lots that we can do to, improve our resiliency, and our, make us be able to roll with the punches more during this assault called COVID-19.
Yeah. You mentioned exercise. I've put on about 35 pounds during this thing.
You and many others. Science around this actually has been really interesting. The more that we are inactive, the more we sit on the couch, okay? And just literally sit on the couch. What happens is your brain, just imagine your brain is like a motherboard on your PC, right? And it truly is. It's like a motherboard, okay, on the PC, on the computer. And what happens is when we're sitting on the couch doing nothing, we're just sitting there, the brain circuits begin to activate a little differently. In other words, those brain circuits that start to active when we're doing nothing, those brain circuits that are responsible for us just thinking about ourselves and sort of like not liking where we're at, we get kind of like down on ourselves. And a lot of times when people wake up first thing in the morning, they notice that their mind's thinking about things, often not very nice things about themselves. And then they start craving food and eating too much. And then when you do something, whether like go for a jog, do some push-ups, sit-ups, lift some weights, or let's say you read a book or talk to some friends, that whole other circuit activates, which is a healthy circuit, which turns off the bad circuit. So the bad circuit in your brain is activated when you're doing nothing. And when you do something, I don't just mean physically, but do something like mentally, it actually turns off the bad circuit. And therefore, people will often say that when they work out or something, they don't want to eat junk food. In fact, it disgusts the idea of eating like a burger after you're working out hard in the gym. And people often say, how come I don't crave that crap when I'm actually working out hard? Well, because your brain's turning all that off. That's why I tell people, stay active, not just because I'm like trying to become a fitness guru. It's because it turns off that bad circuit. And that bad circuit that makes you not like yourself and feel bad about yourself. And people just say, oh, I don't feel good about myself. The heck with it. I'm just going to eat everything. As you said, scorched earth. I'm just going to eat like a ton of cookies and so on. And what you can do is distract yourself by becoming active, and it turns off the bad circuit.
Wow. And this is a actual physical thing that happens in a
Absolutely. Absolutely. We see it in the MRI scan in the brain. And
wow.
it's really kind of interesting because it's kind of interesting because I used to always think as a scientist that if we're just doing nothing, that our brain is just chill. Actually, it's not the case. When it's a bit like, okay, let's say you're
I,
using,
I I thought your analogy with the motherboard was just gonna go towards it's idle. So like a computer, the circuit spike,
yeah,
and I thought you were gonna say it's idle, but you went a completely different area with that, which
yeah,
I find really surprising. Like I had
yeah.
no.
Absolutely, because what's interesting is that I thought the same thing too. If we're just chilling on the couch, right? I thought that the brain was idle, but actually it's the other way around. This is kind of a little bit the opposite of what you would expect. When you're just sitting on the couch doing nothing, it's almost as though that the idle of your car turned way up. So it's revved right up. And that's what's happening. It's kind of the opposite of what you would experience. And when you start doing something, reading a book, maybe talking to some friends, go for a run, lift some weights, it turns the idle down. And it's also kind of the opposite way, or it's the opposite way around. And so that's why people have those negative thoughts when they're just kind of like they don't like themselves, get pretty anxious, down on themselves, when they're just kind of like in a zone, in that zone, right? And then when you start doing something, it turns it off. And we've got all kinds of medical language for these circuits and so on, but it's actually what we see in the MRI scanner looking at people's brain.
That is fascinating. Being depressed or being in that bad state completely changes your outlook on everything to the point where you don't even believe you could have said something.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely. Absolutely. No, it's, it's just human nature. And I think that, going back to what we said earlier, I think that during COVID-19, the fact that people's lives have been turned upside down and they're not involved in their usual day-to-day activities, they default to this kind of, hanging around, and that hanging around, lying on the couch, watching Netflix or whatever they're doing, that leads to a change in how the brain circuit, the motherboard's working, and it's changing our entire way that we're thinking about the world. And so it's really important to keep active mentally and physically, but also it's important to be aware of pollution, not just air pollution and noise pollution, but also social media pollution. And I think that can also make life worse for a lot of people.
yeah, the social media is definitely I've gotten better at not responding. I used to get
Yep.
pulled into a lot of arguments and particularly political stuff, just people disagreeing and it's almost like I'd see one pro Trump post, then the same article with a negative spin to it. So it was
Yeah.
like the same exact article with two different completely viewpoints, and I feel like my head is being like, it's crazy. Now, in the email that I received from your colleague, they mentioned how winter's coming. That sounds like Game of Thrones. Winter's coming,
Yeah.
and how you believe that this will make things worse.
It's a great question. And, for people in the Southern hemisphere, the Southern climates where it's warm and, in South Beach, Miami, it's a bit of a
Mm.
different situation than in the North, Michigan, Chicago, and so on, out to Minnesota, northern climates, New England, keep going. Northern climates are, because the days are shorter, of course, it's colder, darker. The reality is there is a higher risk for having so-called seasonal depression, which typically is, the same thing as getting more depressed in the fall and the winter. That's certainly been well described, and that's happening about now. And I think we need to recognize that. But you're right. You kind of preempted, because in the sense that the way we manage this, the principles are still the same in terms of structuring your day, getting your sleep, portion control, avoid pollution, and I think that what's different, obviously, if there's snow outside and it's dark and icy and so on, yes, the gyms are closed. It's hard to get there. It just means one has to be increasingly creative around the house,
Mm.
push-ups, sit-ups, things of that nature, but you've got to remain active. And I think we also need to press this point strongly that I'm not trying to make the case that from a physical activity perspective, people train to be Olympians. I'm not saying that. You don't need to go to the Olympics. You don't need to be that. Just getting your some activity going, because it's good for your heart, good for your soul, but also that goes back to what we talked about. When you're active, even modestly active, like just doing some, stretches and so on and so on, it allows that circuit of your brain that in the motherboard that's kind of making you feel bad about yourself, it turns that one off,
Mm.
and it kind of turns on other parts of your brain, other circuits that don't so much make you feel good. They can, but they are helping you do your other task. And it's almost like that part of your brain circuit that's active when you're just sitting around. It's like having a radio on. It's just like a bad song. And when you do things, it turns that radio right down. And I think that in itself is a good enough reason to do some activities. And so everything's the same, but I think you're right. And it goes back to what we talked about very early in our conversation about support and redirect, listen to friends and so on, but redirect them to medical help if they need it. I mean, there's help out there, and we're concerned that people are hesitant going to the clinician, going to the care provider, because they fear they might get COVID while they're there. That's not likely going to happen. These centers are taking precautions and so on. And medical centers across America are saying we're seeing a downturn in people coming to our clinics. People are, for a bunch of reasons. And so I think people need to be aware of that.
You have a site called AltMed, right? That
Yeah.
you run.
Yeah.
Is there what approach is there with that? And is there anything that does food factor into this? Are there supplements that we can take? Things that we can do, aside from the physical
Yeah.
to kind of improve?
This is an area where the medical and the scientific community is really actively researching. And there's different ways to think about diet. Let's just walk through this. So one way to think about diet is to add something to your diet. In other words, add more omega-3, or to add more multivitamins, or as you said, add something like CBD. That's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is to take things away from your diet. So in other words, take away the carbs, right? And just sort of focus on more protein and fat. And kind of more of these kind of ketogenic type diets. And another way to take away your diet is the abstinence diets, where you're sort of, you're only eating once a day or once every 2 days, or that kind of thing. And there's different versions of this. And then a third way to think about this is sort of a combination where you're either adding or taking away, and you're intermittently fasting and things like that. So there's different ways you can manipulate diet. What I would say is that for now, the best advice, I think the best advice based on the best available science would be to eat a balanced, healthy diet for now. We don't have good science that's just knock your socks off science that says, oh, use this vitamin or that vitamin or this, or use that, or take that away, or don't do this. There's some really interesting stuff going on right now. But for now, what we say to people is, to the extent possible, eat a balanced diet. Now, that assumes you can pay for it. And everyone knows when you go to the grocery store to eat, to get fruits and vegetables and so on, it's a lot more expensive than buying, let's say some tacos and some burgers, okay? And we all know that.
Yep.
And pizzas are much cheaper. So I'm aware of that, but just put that aside for a moment. There is some interesting ideas, especially during COVID, about vitamin D. And people maybe are hearing that maybe vitamin D could protect you a little bit. Other types of things like some of the antioxidants that are out there, stuff like that. I would say that is interesting. I don't think at this point, at least from my perspective, we can make a strong statement, let's all do that. But there's some interesting leads there. I think the way to really up our game, to increase our game when it comes to diet, is to just try to reduce some of the garbage that we eat a lot of, like the sugars, you don't necessarily need to have a keto diet, but we consume way too much, soda. Keep it within moderation. Carbs. Keep it within moderation. Processed food. Keep it within moderation. And I think if we can just do that, that I think would be upping our game compared to what it is right now. And then I think we'll find out in the next 3 to 5 years whether these, intermittent fastings, ketogenics, all these augmentations like with, omegas and NAC and acetylcysteine, all these things people are looking at. It's all pretty cool. But for now, I think people should just try and go for a balanced, healthy diet.
Actually fast. I do a 8 hour fasting window. I was doing more for
Yeah.
I was doing that more for the weight benefits of it, but doesn't really work when you're fasting with Haagen-Dazs.
No.
You,
That's right. That's exactly right.
it frees up time. You kind of free up time to do what you have to do, and because you don't have to work. Because I used to eat every 3 hours. So I was one of those people that ate every 3 hours throughout the day, again, for bodybuilding benefits and stuff.
Right.
And I felt like I was always eating. So I'm working, I'm doing what I have to do, but I'm always in the process of eating because I'm eating every 3 hours. So my day always had to revolve around, I need to be ready for that meal.
Right.
Otherwise, I'll get a headache or I'll start to shake, and, changing it to this 1 to 9 time frame has freed up a lot of my time in terms of
cool.
just, but I don't know if it's, they're supposed to have anti-aging benefits. I don't know that I've really experienced any of those. But I feel okay overall. So
I mean, this is an interesting part because there is some really cool science behind the intermittent fasting diets, improving your cholesterol, your sugar, your inflammation. It's pretty cool. And to your point, there is some suggestions that could reduce the aging process, at least in animals. One of the interesting facts about this conversation is that, and I often put this up as a pop quiz. So the pop quiz is, what's the most proven way to slow the aging process, at least in animals? I think we're still not sure yet with humans, but in lower animals like, mice and rats, it turns out to food restriction, intermittent fasting. And there's something about, because when we eat, what happens is it causes some inflammation, and inflammation leads to what we call aging. It ages you. So inflammation leads to aging. And by changing, trying to avoid the sugars, which can be quite inflammatory, and trying to be more intermittent when you eat, it decreases the inflammation, which may also decrease the aging. So that's kind of the thinking around it.
Sometimes I feel kind of like I struggle with, like, I'm complaining about weight during COVID when people are losing their lives.
Right.
People are losing their homes. So, that also pushes me further into that than eat the Haagen-Dazs. It's very weird, and I'm sure this is all stuff that you would be able to say, oh yeah, you're doing this because of this, with the medical training. It's all, you're feeling guilty because you're whining about weight when people are losing their lives. And because now you're feeling guilt, now you're also feeling crap because you got fatter, then you eat more.
Right.
It sounds like, based on this stuff you mentioned that I had completely new to me, I'm going to really force myself to stay active no matter how I feel or what's happening in the world. If they close the gyms again, then I have some weights here. I'm going to force myself to use them, even if it's only half an hour, if it's a shorter workout, because in my mind, if it's not 100% like all the way, it's hard for me to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everyone listening, it's important for them to know that activity is not only, doing push-ups, sit-ups, lifting weights, stuff like that. Also, exercise your mind, read, find some enjoyable, material to read, and
Yeah, I got this.
Also, art. Exactly. Do some reading.
Does the video games count? What do you think?
It's a great question. I think we need to be open to the possibility that maybe in some circumstances, video games or computer-based type entertainment may, in some cases, be therapeutic. For example, there's been a recent FDA approval of a computer game to treat ADHD. So there's an example where it can be your friend. But these things can be your friend or your enemy, your frenemy, I guess, in the sense that too much time playing these types of games and so on. First of all, it means by definition you're sitting on the couch. So you want to get up and moving around. We think some of the obesity in children is because of the sitting around playing games all day. But secondly is that I think like a lot of things, you want to make sure that you're not just doing just one thing. I would never recommend people do, not that you can, but do push-ups all day long. But you want to change it up, right? So, but I think that it's really, really important to stay active, not just physically, but sort of mentally. You want to stay active.
I've been playing an online game, and it's cool because there's people there, so it creates engagement, which is nice. Those guys are crazy. So like some of these people, some of them are toxic. They're saying toxic things and stuff, but to me, it's funnier to listening to them. I'm listening to them fight, and I'm joking around with them, and it's creating a bit of socializing while you shoot each other up in this video game. That's why I mentioned that. Like if it, because it does. Like I've had conversations even while we're playing and we're shooting each other, but we have conversations and stuff. So it creates a bit of a community in a way. So I wondered if that. But I think it's become when I'd be working out, now I'm playing the game, and therein lies the problem.
Well, what's interesting is that the science shows that 1 + 1 does not equal 2. 1 + 1 = 3. And what do I mean by that is that if you keep physically active and you keep your mind active, those two things equals 3.
Synergy.
It has a synergy effect on your brain. That's been shown through some of the science.
Well, I am teaching again, so it's forced me to. That's why, as a matter of fact, that's why I started to teach accountability.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great way to incentivize, or as you said, to hold yourself accountable. So let's face it, not everyone. I mean, I exercise most days of the week, but I have to confess, I don't wake up every morning. I work out in the morning. I don't wake up every morning like rah. I want to go, get, pound my body and get sweaty and so on. There's days we're not as motivated. And so it's good to have that kind of accountability to something or some person. It's a great safety valve, especially those days, which are going to happen where you don't quite got the same kind of gas in the tank to want to get out there and do it, Is
there anything that you have that you would like to share in terms of how people can contact you or how they can research more?
Yeah, I think, look, I'll leave people with a website they can go to. It's www.DBSA Alliance, the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, DBS Alliance, Depression Bipolar Support Alliance.org. That actually is a website. It's an organization that's peer support, great website, lots of resources across the country, most of it, lots of online things people can access to give people sort of tactics and strategies how to, in fact, be able to cope with the situation today, et cetera. And anyways, I think people should consider going there. And from that, people, in fact, can, just look for resources. And I think, be aware of that. And I think finally, just be aware of what we talked about earlier, listen and redirect. And don't hesitate to get care when needed.
Thank you. I thank you so much for coming on the show and talking and sharing. It's a nice conversation. I've enjoyed it.
I have as well. It's been a good conversation, and all the best, not just to you, but all your listeners. And we'll look forward to brighter 2021.
Yeah, okay. God willing. Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care. Right. Bye-bye.
You are listening to the NYC Talking Podcast. www.nyctalking.com. Please like NYC Talking on Facebook. Please follow Angel R Talk on Twitter and Instagram. We are NYC Talking, the realest lifestyle blog ever. Thanks for listening.